Good afternoon. If I could ask the remnants of the last panel to maybe shift their discussion outside the room so that we can start the next panel, that would be highly appreciated. Okay, a very good late morning to everybody, and thank you very much for joining us on day 3 of the Doha Forum. It's been quite an intensive couple of days already with lots of fascinating discussions, but it's wonderful that you have still stuck around and are joining us for this panel, which is entitled Promoting Dialogues of Coexistence, and I'm delighted to be the moderator for this session. So the idea today is really to outline a new policy, diplomatic and research initiative that the Gulf Research Center and INTERPEACE are cooperating with to really try to define what could be a more positive multilateral vision of global coexistence. I think the overall rationale for this project, I think, is basically self-evident. We have an international community right now that is very much marked by fragmentation, by high levels of mistrust, by geopolitical tensions and divides. At the same time, we have a little bit of a dilemma that I think the international community is facing. On the one hand, a multilateral system that we believe is not functioning as it was originally envisioned. But at the same time, the globe and the world is facing a number of crises. We can speak about the climate, we can speak about economic volatility, we have a lot of conflict situations, we have technological innovation, we have societal disruptions. All these areas really need a more effective multilateral system in place. So the question really what we want to draw on and hopefully also do in the project that we are conducting is what could a new vision for global coexistence really look like. And it's not one that should be just grounded in an institutional reform, but also one that involves and really includes the deeper cultural and political work of fostering genuine dialogue. Dialogue among the governments, among the states, among civil society, among communities, and among the youth. To really begin to see how we can shape global solutions to many of the issues that we are confronted with. So in this panel, and I'm looking forward also to the discussion that follows, really is to try to explain what some of those principles of global coexistence should be and what they look like. Sort of tackle the questions of what would be the best way to start rebuilding some of the trust that currently is missing. And then focus a little bit on the mechanisms that we can put forward, which will help us to sort of initiate and then sustain meaningful cooperation. And to help us in all of this, it's a quite broad and quite a big subject to sort of construct a little bit. But I'm happy to have a fantastic panel with me. I'll do very quick introductions here. Dr. Abdulaziz is chairman of the Gulf Research Center. Mr. Itonde Kakoma is the president of INTERPEACE. Dr. Comfort Ero, the president of the International Crisis Group, and His Excellency Dr. Majid Ansari, the advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, official spokesperson of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and president of the Center for International Policy Research. So maybe let me start with you, Dr. Abdulaziz. Give me a little bit of a sense, as chairman of GRC also, what made you sort of decide to start on this initiative? How do you see it going forward, and sort of the rationale behind it a little bit? Your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Christian. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning, and I again would like to extend my deepest appreciation and thanks to the State of Qatar, to the Foreign Ministry, and also to His Excellency Dr. Majid Al-Ansari for welcoming to have such a discussion on the idea that it was started from the Gulf Research Center. You know, when we look at the war today, how complicated, how negative it is, how conflict is expanding, how unfairness, how lack of role of the international organization, the United Nations, to bring the peace that we are all looking for, to the extension of the conflict in different zones. I was in Madrid and I talked to my one of our Gulf Research Center team, Rafael Hernandez, and also I was visiting His Excellency Javier Solana. And with that discussion with Mr. Javier Solana, I said, why can't we have a global peaceful coexistence? He said, yes, and then we start talking about it and putting some of the thought together. As a result of that, I went to my good friend here, Mr. Itonde, at the INTERPEACE in Geneva, and said, listen, you work in peace, and we wanted to do more work in peace in the world. Enough conflict, enough segregation, enough a sort of sectarianism, divisioning, and all these things. We need to have a peaceful world that we can live in. So why don't we join our effort together and we create this global peaceful coexistence, and also invite think tanks from all over the world, those whom they believe in the same principle, those whom they believe that we need to have a peaceful world and ending the conflict, enjoy more negotiation and a political and mediation, political discussion. And you can look at the role that the State of Qatar is playing significantly on peaceful talk, on mediation, in bringing the parties together, all the way from Philippines to Latin America. They did a lot of excellent work and an excellent effort there. So I said, there's no better place for us to announce the starting of this one than the Doha Forum. And the Doha Forum is the global network of think tank it's becoming, with more than 5,000 participants, with almost everybody I know, our friends from Uruguay, all the way to Argentina, to South Africa, to Russia, to everybody is here. So this is the place where we should announce the creation of this one. And we are opening the door for the global network, because global network is very important. If we all put our effort together, consolidated, we were talking to the chairman of the INTERPEACE, His Excellency Amr Musa, and he said, yes, we need to bring those whom they believe in peace together, that we can all put as our effort as an NGO, as non-government organization, as a society organization, together to encourage such things. So we're very happy today to be here in Doha to announce this, and I think it's a great beginning. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That starts us as well. And I think you already mentioned one important component is the fact of having more of a global network, and then looking at also how do we involve different voices from different parts of the debate into that discussion. Mr. Itonde, if I can come to you for a second, maybe also outline a little bit your rationale for the projects. Why do you think that sort of these new approaches, new networks are really needed? And is this really an opportune moment, or is this an absolute essential moment to do something like this?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and joining in deep appreciation, as expressed by Dr. Abdulaziz, to Qatar, and through you, Your Excellency, really for the convening authority that you demonstrate in advancing global solutions at a time in which it feels sometimes impossible to bring the unlike-minded together. We're seeing time and time again the ability, the investment of peace, even if it is difficult, does bear results. I'm not sure if colleagues in the room have observed in the midst of all the discussions underway, but within last 5 days, here in Doha, signing of a peace agreement, while we've been in discussions concerning Colombia, and just a day or so prior to, under the good offices of Qatar and mediation, a rapprochement between Rwanda and DRC, at a time of regional instability with global consequences. So that investment in peace is bearing fruit, and we know to really bring about the kinds of durable solutions required at a moment where it feels, even if here we are reminded of certain fundamental universal commitments, but it feels as if there is a disinvestment, not just feels, statistically it shows, in those things that make for sustainable development and peace. So is it an opportunity? Absolutely so. But do we stick to the old ways of proceeding? No, that would be a mistake. Are we starting from scratch? No. There are strong foundations, not least of which being shared values, universal norms, enshrined in law, on which we build and which we have heard so clearly articulated here in this forum. But having said that, as through the visionary leadership of Dr. Abdulaziz, there is also a need to ensure that those independent voices, not just from certain blocks, but reflecting a broader spirit of universality, come together and really reflect upon the main challenges facing us now and into the future, from the point of view of coexistence, the universal things that bind us together as humans. With all these dire statistics, we forget that we're talking about human lives, the suffering of people and communities. But we're also talking about the potential for those very communities to put forward solutions to tackle these challenges. So we see this as a partnership, as a friendship in the advancement of dialogue, not solely between ourselves, but with as diverse a body of committed individuals who can think beyond the immediate into what brings us together for a more sustainable future. Is it an opportunity? It's a necessity to do so, to provide that shared leadership with humility in light of the changing drastic circumstances we're facing. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think you brought it to a point right at the end there, that it's an opportunity, but it's really a necessity first and foremost, given the fact that, as you mentioned, closure of civic spaces, the sort of appearance of a disinvestment into more durable solutions in the end of the day. So it is a call to return basically to some fundamental foundations that we may have lost sight of a little bit and that we need to refocus on. So that's very useful to frame, set sort of the overall framework. Dr. Comfort, if I can come to you, I mean, as head of the International Crisis Group, of course, you are dealing daily with many of the conflict situations that are happening around the world, and I'm sure your work is not getting any easier in the organization that you deal with. Maybe you can take us just a little bit, maybe one small step back to sort of say, what do you, from your point of view, why do you think the current international system is sort of failing in its efforts? Because I think we need to also make an analysis of what is ailing the international system as a whole. Please.
First thing to do, I think we should also just congratulate this union of coexistence, and with your permission, Christian, I think we should give the union an applause. It's good to see sort of the development of the relationship, which I think only further strengthens the field of dialogue and then the field of mediation. But also, I think in an increasingly transnational world where, you know, no crisis stays in its region, but easily becomes internationalized, being able to stretch your hands out across several borders to realize that there is a connection between a crisis in Venezuela and then what is happening right across the other side of the world. So I'm hoping that your global coexistence network really does enable us to connect the dots, and then although, you know, each conflict And we also have to think in terms of the context, and the specificity of a crisis. But there are lessons that we can draw from one conflict or one region to help inform how we deal with other things as well. I believe I'm talking to an audience that has a very good understanding of the world in which we're in and the sort of the changing geopolitics, geoeconomics world that we're living in. I think I'm in front of an audience that understands that we are in a time where the multilateral firewall itself is crumbling pretty quickly. We've been saying it for the last few years now that wars are rising, that we're also facing what I see as a tsunami of crises where you're seeing mass expulsion, displacement, crimes and war crimes, the civilian protection, the guardrails that would protect civilians are also crumbling. I'm talking to you at a time of sort of, a depletion of international or the traditional centres where international aid comes from. But I'm also talking at a time where we do see, despite the challenges that you see in the crises, there are opportunities. The question is whether you're able to seize those opportunities. The question is whether you can fill in the vacuum. And here I think it's not lost on us that the Guardian, the UK Guardian, defined Qatar as the centre of diplomacy. And that's to acknowledge the fact that, if you wanted real evidence of the changing nature of the actors that are shaping facts on the ground and that are shifting the policy dial and are opening the space for rethinking and being innovative about diplomacy and mediation, the fact that you're able to bring 6,000 people plus over a weekend to debate these issues and to try and think what the world could look like and aspire to a different world, then credit to where credit is due, which is to Qatar as well. So that is the world that we're living in. So less of the analysis. I think everybody understands the analysis. But then what do we do now, especially at the centres of mediation? The centre of diplomacy is evolving and going into a new direction. I think the Prime Minister was very right to put a spotlight on one of the fundamental factors that is a challenge of our time, that we are living in an era of impunity. The challenge for all of us now is how to deal with the twin crisis of accountability and justice in a time of wars rising and where leaders, quite frankly, can get away with it and can get away with usurping the principles and the norms that you seek to bring back together as well. We are talking at a time where it's very easy to override international rules, where it's very easy to override international laws. The treaties that bind state corporation is being undermined as we speak. The treaties that shape the way in which statecraft, in which we are supposed to guard civilians, the way in which we're supposed to guard the rights of citizens across their borders, even if they're migrants, has been undermined. The way in which we cooperate as citizens, solidarity for me must accompany this dialogue of global coexistence. If we break down the solidarity, and if there's not solidarity between humanity, then it's going to be very difficult to have a dialogue even amongst ourselves. And for me, this is a challenge of our time. Because when you look at Gaza, when you look at Ukraine, when you look at Venezuela, when you look at Haiti, one of the things that worries me, and I hope there's a way in which we can rethink about it, is the empathy that as citizens, we are able to empathize with humanity that we see that is suffering in other parts of the world. This was a core principle that shaped how we thought about international relations in the 90s, in the 2000s. It's not a glorious era, but there was a sense of humanity. There was a sense of compassion. There was a sense of empathy. And watching these things breaking down is, I think, what should worry us at night. And what you're doing, Qatar, reminding us about the challenges about accountability and about justice and the era of impunity and how to overturn that, for me, is the core things that should shape how we go forward as well. Because if you don't have those three things, then it becomes very difficult to think about these issues. So it's an appeal to ourselves that we don't give up on the principle of solidarity and the principle of empathy for all humanity, especially when we are seeing key issues like migration of peoples, like movement of people across borders, especially when there's suffering, and to see that this is becoming a threat also undermines the ability for us to coexist as humans as well. But I'll stop there, Christian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Comfort. I think that's a very valid plea and argument. Again, the values and the principles that we need to return to and always keep in mind as we construct anyway in terms of going forward and what should guide us overall. I think that's extremely important to underline. Dr. Majid, Qatar has already mentioned many different times, and I think this is one of the examples that we see right now going on of trying to also take a little bit of a different approach to many of the issues and challenges which were confronted. So, I mean, looking at it again from the perspective of Doha, how do you see the best way to reinvigorate really global cooperation for peace building? And maybe also what are already, being very active in mediating many different conflict situations. What are maybe some early lessons already to be drawn from that? I remember when you joined me for a discussion in Brussels, you emphasized the fact that if you're not involved, then you become part of the problem, which I thought was a very apt kind of description. And maybe you can elaborate on that also a little bit, Dr. Majid.
Thank you, Christian. Let me begin by saying that when Dr. Abdulaziz came to us with this idea, I thought this is going to be the most important discussion to have at this time. When we talk about coexistence today, what we don't see in the rearview mirror is that for about 2 decades now, existence of us as human beings was put into question. Coexisting assumes that we need to find a way to stay on this planet together. And the challenges towards that are becoming not superficial, not idealistic, but an actual threat to our existence. We are destroying each other, not only in the physical sense, through wars and conflicts, but in the ideological, intellectual sense. And I think one of the main problems we're facing today, to answer what you said, Christian, is the decay of dialogue as a way of ending conflict. This forum began a quarter of a century ago. At that time, Qatar was not the capital of international mediation by far. People did not look onto this region as a region that would solve conflicts. It was a region that would export conflict. At the time, dialogue was the weapon of choice for Europe, was the weapon of choice for the United States, for the Soviet Union, Russia. And everybody was having dialogue about this region, outside this region. People from this region were having dialogue in European capitals, and this is why most of the agreements that we talk about in the region today of that era have the names of European cities, Geneva, Oslo, Madrid. But slowly, as we were trying to introduce ourselves as a venue for dialogue, as a mediator in the world, we started finding ourselves isolated. Isolated in the sense that the concept and the idea of dialogue was abandoned all around the world. Parties of conflict today cannot accept sitting down together on the same table. A conflict like the one that's happening in Ukraine right now, if that happened 20, 30 years ago, when there was a red phone that would connect the Soviet Union capital to the US capital, when there were meetings happening under the table, over the table, on record and off record, would have had countless dialogues happening on it throughout the process. Right now, even the fact that you can bring the two parties to the table is put in question. And actually, dialogue is being treated sometimes as a dirty word in dealing with conflict. It has to do, of course, with bandwidth. There are so many conflicts right now where we don't have enough countries, enough states, enough international organizations to go around, enough funding to go around. But it also has to do with the polarization of the social media age. Social media is not only affecting our youth and our society, it's affecting the way statesmen operate. Political decisions are being made according to their effect, their immediate effect that they're going to have on public opinion through social media and other outlets. We're seeing talks collapse because of leaks that happen on social media. And the decision-making process within our systems now is based on the immediate reaction that they are getting through the media and through their peoples. And therefore, it makes it more difficult for these decision-makers to take the decision to get on a plane, go to another capital, sit down with their enemies, and discuss how to end conflict. And actually, more than that, we have reached a situation now of scapegoating those who would stick their necks out for mediation. Countries like Qatar, Oman, our Nordic partners, who have, for many years, spent a lot of their political capital, their efforts, and their financial capabilities into mediation and peace process, are now under threat. You are sitting in a city where, less than 10 minutes away from here, the State of Israel decided to bomb a residential area that houses hundreds of people, 6 schools, 13 embassies, a number of nurseries, just because they did not like the possible outcome of mediation. It had nothing to do with targeting the leaders of a group who everybody knew where they were. That building was public knowledge to everybody, including the Israeli delegation, by the way, that stayed across the road from that building in the Ritz-Carlton for more than 2 years. But this attack on mediation was the culmination of an international failure on dealing with conflict, an international failure to accept that every conflict, however severe it is, will end on the negotiation table. And it was, as Comfort was saying, it was the result of disgusting impunity to all that is happening in the world today. Every aggressor today is allowed to kill and pillage in a way that would take us back hundreds of years in the story of humankind. And we are reduced to giving concession after concession, not to stop them from doing that, but to ask them to kill less people, to destroy less neighborhoods, to not have respect for international law, but to try to take them back a step from going 100 miles away from international law. And that, of course, has, the implication of this is very simple. We are moving from a world order to a disorder. I mean, we've taken it for granted. Now we talk about the multipolar system and moving toward. I don't think we're moving towards a multipolar system. I don't think we're moving towards any kind of system. I don't think even we're moving towards a power-based international order. We are moving into a system where anybody can do whatever they like if they can do it, regardless of big or small, strong or weak. If you have the ability to wreak havoc wherever you want in the world, you can do it, because nobody will come and hold you accountable. If a lot of the conflicts that are happening today, if they happened 20, 30 years ago, there will be an international way of dealing with it. We saw that in Yugoslavia, we saw that even in Libya very recently, we saw that in other places around the world, where the world came together, found a solution. Not a perfect solution, but found a solution. Where the world was able to come together. And today, in today's world, those who are trying to remain true to the ideals of dialogue and peace are under threat, and those who are the aggressors are being either applauded, protected, or are being given carte blanche to do whatever they want in their regions. This will not be in the interest of the small and medium powers, like the GCC, Europe, and Middle East countries. But in the long run, how is this going to play out, even for the great powers who think that they are above all of that? They will end up living in a world where even they will be under threat, and they will have to deplete their resources in order to protect their own peace. And let me end with this. Dr. Eros said very, very clearly that there's a problem with empathy today. There's a problem with compassion. And I think the main problem right now, to go back to the theme of coexistence, is the dehumanization of each other. We have reached a situation we are not only more concerned with our own selves than others, we have lost the ability to care about others. We've lost the ability to see other communities, other societies as our own. We've lost the ability to look into the eyes of a child in Gaza, a child in Ukraine, and think of that child as mine. If we are unable to think of these children as worth protecting, if we are unable, even as decision makers and politicians, I'm not talking here about us on the street, if decision makers and politicians are unable to sit on a table that might end up saving these children, then we have lost the right to exist as human beings.
Thank you so much, Dr. Majid. I mean, I think it needs to be put into these stark terms in order also to jolt us back into what needs to be done as next steps. So that's very appreciative. Again, the emphasis on the need for really humanity and accountability. We don't have that much time in this panel, unfortunately. I do want to give a chance if there are a couple of questions or comment from the audience to do so. Maybe I can grab 2 or 3 if there are such things, and then we can go back to the panel. I see a person in the front row, then the gentleman behind, and also the person here in the front. Please. I think there's a microphone that will be coming to you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank Dr. Abdulaziz al-Sakr for his hard work and for working very hard actually for the dialogue. My question is addressed to His Excellency Mr. Majid. Can you tell us more about the war in Gaza and what do you expect actually will happen in the coming days? I know that is Doha very grateful actually hosted the dialogue here and paid a heavy price for doing a wonderful job for trying actually to find a fair solution for the Palestinian. Be highly appreciated actually if we can hear more about what he is expecting to happen in the near future in regarding to the Palestinian in Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you can pass the microphone just to the gentleman behind you.
Thank you very much for
if you can briefly introduce yourself so we know who
I
you
am
are.
Abdurrahman from Syria. I'm a humanitarian worker with the UN. Thank you very much for this very, very, very valuable session. A quick question, Dr. Majid, if you would please. With regards to dialogue and mediation, a certain element of power balance needs to be present for a dialogue to take place. In some of the cases you've mentioned, especially, for example, Palestine and Israel, there's a complete imbalance of power. How does the mediator navigate that element? Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. And then we have the gentleman right here in the front row as well.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. أنا مسرور جدا أن أرحب بكم وشكرا.
I am pleased to welcome you. Thank you, Dr. Abdulaziz Sagher and Your Excellency Dr. Majid Al-Ansari.
And I am very want to thank the representative of International Crisis Group because I finished my book about Salam al-Khurub fi Sudan. I also rely on your sources. Shukran jazilan. But I want to say that a few days day before we discussed the peacekeeping in the world, and I was trying to criticize what is happening because we discuss a lot of things, but we are not criticizing our own approaches. And I think we need more academic research in order to explain the theoretical base what we are doing. You see, you use the same instruments which you used 10 years ago, 5 years ago. What I see, you see, I'm sorry for saying this, but this is my personal viewing. That's why we need, like we say that at time changed, but we should do this, you see, it's one thing. And another one, we're speaking about the results, but we should speak also about the reasons. Without this, we cannot solve the results. Shukran jazilan.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think that's an apt point to look into specifically some of the reasons already. I think there were a couple of questions you do, Dr. Majid, but then I'll also come to the rest of the panel. Maybe we'll just get you started.
first of all, very quickly on Gaza, I mean, this is not the topic of the session, but just to give everybody an update, you know, the situation is very difficult. It's, we've known since the agreement came into place that it's going to be very difficult. The main reason why we are stuck right now, I think, is because of that imbalance and impunity. At the end, we all know who needs to take the decision to move to stage 2. And we all know what needs to happen for that to take place. So I'm not going to insult your intelligence by explaining this. But on the ground right now, the situation is getting harder every day. The violations are continuing. Aid is not flowing in the way it was supposed to. The disagreements over how to move to stage 2 are still there. But we are working with our partners to find innovative ways of pushing towards the stage 2, and to give them credit, the administration in the US is doing a lot of pressure in order for that to happen. It shouldn't be an issue when you are mediating between two parties, you know, which one has the upper hand, which one has a stronger army, which one has more money. Because this is the whole purpose and concept of mediation. You don't meet, if they are at equal capacities, then they would not be at war. War happens when one party perceives itself to be stronger than the other. And therefore you have invasions, and you have, you know, non-state actors, and you have all of these models that are based on power projection and power perception. But when you do that, when you put two parties to the table, you put, you know, Taliban on one side, the United States on one side, which happened in this hotel, right? How do you get the two parties to agree? Well, of course, there is a power element where you have to have some kind of either fatigue on the stronger side, or increased capacity on the weaker side in order to sit on the table. But we, the international community, should supplement the weakness of one of the parties on the table, because we are pushing for accountability. We are pushing to stop infringements on international law. And therefore, we should be standing with the underdog. We should be standing with the party that cannot defend itself in order for it to be able to defend itself. This is the whole notion of having a United Nations, is that when there is imbalance, that imbalance is corrected by the international community filling that cup on the other side. And therefore, I think it's not the role of the mediator, but it's the role of the international community to give credence to that. And finally, on has mediation, has peace facilitation changed? Yes, but not for the positive. I think that the instruments have changed completely, but we've lost a lot of the very powerful weapons in the arsenal of the mediators and the peace facilitators, amongst which is the technical and institutional capacities that used to supplement any kind of mediation around the world, any track 2. You used to have a very clear process for mediation. Today, most mediation is ad hoc by nature. That is a result, of course, of a lot of the countries and states with institutional capacities have pulled out and have not done a lot of mediation for years now. It's, I mean, something serious on a lot of the conflicts that are happening. But it has also to do with institutional decay. Funding when it comes to UN agencies and international organizations, funding when it comes to NGOs like INTERPEACE and others has suffered a lot, especially in the last couple of years. So the institutional capacities have went down. The focus mostly now is on ceasefire, not sustainable peace. Nobody even is talking about sustainable peace. If you talk about it, you're sidelined because it's not feasible. And therefore, yes, it has changed, but it hasn't changed positively. I think one of the main things we are trying to do in Qatar right now is build consortiums around peace. It's bring countries to work together, like Colombia, where we brought, you know, Switzerland and Spain and Qatar, of course, and Norway together to do this mediation. Another thing is to bring in the NGOs and the institutions along with track 1s through track 1. So for the states to ask the institutions to help. You know, we've been working very closely with ICG and with INTERPEACE and with other organizations on that front. They are helping us with contextualizing the mediations we do. They are helping us with the lower level mediations that need to do on a societal level. So it's very important to have that as well. But I think it's important to work together in the general sense.
Great, thank you. Comfort, if I can also come to you, maybe some comments. And again, this idea of the mechanisms, are reforming the international system, or do we need new mechanisms? Have we been effective, and what needs to change on that front? I think that's an important element here. Maybe you can just focus on that a second.
Itonde and I are sort of children of the era of one of the never agains, Rwanda. And there we spoke ad nauseum about changing the tools and the instruments and the mechanisms, blah, blah, blah. And then fast forward, then we became, watchers of another never again in the name of Darfur. And then we went through a whole nother workshops about reform of the mechanisms and blah, blah, blah. And then fast forward, Ukraine, and now Gaza. And I unfortunately, to answer your question, I think call us back in 5 years' time and we'll be having the same conversation as well. So there's a healthy diagnosis of the problem. That is not the problem. What is lacking is, and it's always been lacking, is how do you close the gap between the diagnosis of the problem and then how you muster the kind of political will to actually deal with the problem as well. There are people who are really good at providing the contextual analysis. I spend a great deal of my time providing analysis. And I mean, part of the struggle is to make sure that everybody has a shared understanding of the analysis. Then you begin to shift the policy needle. But the biggest challenge then is to corral, in the way you were talking, Dr. Majid, and I like your coalition of key actors, ad hoc coalition, so the willing, who are able to expend their political capital at high risk and are willing to do it in the name of, and we're not shy about it, there's nothing narcissistic about this. There has to be a genuine national interest as well. This is what drives Qatar. I mean, this is why Qatar is engaged in Gaza and Afghanistan. So we recognize that realism of why states act. There is nothing altruistic. It is about the national interest. If you don't tackle what's near abroad, then it's going to come and harm you as well. But even getting states to agree on these issues is also part of the challenge. And what you're proposing here, Dr. Majid, is the sense of urgent capital and how you use your capital to change dynamics on the ground, and which state is willing to do that in a way that goes to the roots of a crisis so that you don't get this cyclical return to crisis. Sudan is a perfect example. I wager I'll be here in 5 years' time to talk to you about Sudan and provide you the greatest analysis in the world on Sudan, and yet the heart of the matter is what are you going to do about it? States that are crucial to turning the dial on Sudan, what are you doing, and how do we massage your interests, your various interests, to change the facts on the ground? So I agree with you on the context, but that for me is not the problem. It is the gap between the early warning and the early action, and the lip service, and I say this to all states, the lip service that a number of states pay to preventative diplomacy. If you put all that money into preventative diplomacy, it will cost you less. It costs you less in human lives, but also in the money you pour into defense, quite frankly. I mean, it's often seen as though it's like a dirty word, preventative diplomacy. It's the hardest one because it requires you to expend your political capital and mobilize all the key political actors to avert a crisis. But it's the most important one, and we, quite frankly, have failed in doing that particular arm on the conflict spectrum. By the way, your Prime Minister said something yesterday that I think we should all safeguard. I want to be known as an architect of peace and not a firefighter. To invest in preventing conflict is the biggest challenge of our time, but it's the most important. And nobody is prepared to expend the money to prevent conflict, but yet we're ready to be firefighters and pour money into defense. Deterrence and diplomacy are crucial if you're serious about peace and dialogue, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Comfort. And over to you, Itonde. I mean, what's the next steps? What do we do? Where do you see the situation?
Thank you so much. It is rare in fora on matters of international peace and security where you feel so grounded in the realities facing all of us. And I think the honesty of this discussion, this dialogue, we spoke of matters of empathy, of humanity. These are the bases on which international law has been built upon. So thank you for grounding us in this, and which is why the language of coexistence is so essential, precisely to get to that investment in prevention. There are many profound things that were said today, and one of which, of many I'll come back to, has to do with sanctity. 80 years ago, the first appointed UN mediator, Count Folke Bernadotte of Sweden, was assassinated in Jerusalem on a peace mission. Precisely 80 years later, same month, the reference you made to the attack on Doha, both are examples, grave examples of violation of sanctity, of the sanctity of peacemakers. A violation of the sanctity of peacemakers, which must be protected. It's not surprising at a moment where you find humanitarian workers being a part of the carnage of war, that you also see peacemakers in the same vein. I think what is crucial, and the example, not just example, the clear strategic demonstration of partnership as an essential ingredient in the advancement of peace that you've just described, is also clear for us. You don't make peace alone. And while you need to sustain dialogue with your friends, that's not with whom you make peace either. You need to engage with those who you're opposed to. And creating that space for all actors to remain in dialogue so as to prevent what Your Excellency described as the culmination of the failure of dialogue to resolve conflict. This is a profound statement. And to reinvest precisely in those spaces, beyond the usual, if you will, with the like-minded and the unlike-minded, precisely towards getting to what is shared, humanity, for all of us. I think it would be too crude and simplistic for me to speak of next steps in light of the profundity of the reflections we've heard, but I assure you of our commitment, personally as an institution, to carry forward this partnership in the advancement of a global dialogue on coexistence that is about all of us, in support of the types of engagements we see Qatar and friends leading. So really thank you for the opportunity, and we stand ready to move forward together.
Thank you very much, Itonde. Dr. Abdulaziz, you got us started out with the discussion, and you have to agree it's been extremely profound in many of the statements that have been made. So I'd also like to see some concluding remarks from your side.
Yes, it makes me feel it's the right initiative. When I see the endorsement of our friends and partner here, the way how they look at it, when I see where can we move forward into that one. And I do hope Your Excellency Dr. Majid, that next year we will bring with us all the partners whom they have agreed to join this initiative in Doha, in the Doha Forum, the global get-together for the think tank and for the civil society. I think this is extremely important, where we can demonstrate to the world that no matter where are you from, whether from Latin America or Sub-Sahara or ASEAN or Central Asia or America or Europe, that we all can get together demanding and asking and believing in the same values, that we need to have a peaceful coexistence. So thank you very much for your endorsement, for your support, for your generosity, for every kind word that you have said. And I think Qatar is setting up a great example for many countries to follow. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for my good friends and partner here together.
Thank you also, Dr. Abdulaziz, and I really want to thank everybody on this panel for what has been an absolutely fascinating discussion. It's only the start now. I mean, I really take away from the discussion here today, A, the very urgency of the situation we're talking about, and B, the fact that, yes, dialogue, but dialogue really never ends. Dialogue is continuing, and we have to spend the effort and the capital of investing in it, because in the end of the day, it is actually the most cheapest alternative when you're thinking of all the others. So thank you very much for all your attention and in joining us here today, and please join me again in thanking the panel.